If this story of finding hope in the dark and believing in kindness resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button.
Maid,
We've got more compelling stories of destiny, love, and unexpected second chances coming soon. Your support helps us tell them. Thank you. The rain was an angry, persistent beat against the city's heart, a relentless drum that seemed to emphasize the chasm between the world outside and the glittering, insulated luxury of the Grand Summit Hotel. In the quiet, plush hallways of the uppermost floors, the air was still and scented with expensive wood polish. It was almost 1 a.m., the hour when exhaustion weighs heaviest on those who live by the clock and the mop. We meet Clara Mendez, a night shift attendant, her movements automatic, her eyes heavy. Her uniform, damped from a previous run-in with a leaking service pipe, clung to her. She wasn't thinking of the gilded she was counting cents, ticking off the days until her mother's next medical payment. Her work slip was crumpled in her pocket. Room 812. The final room. She squinted at the door number in the poorly lit corridor. Was it an 8, or a 3? Weariness made the gold-plated digits blur. With a sigh, she inserted her master key. The latch clicked. The room was dim, dominated by the sweeping panoramic view of the storm-lashed city. The air was thick with the faint, expensive scent of high-end cologne and fine cigar smoke. Clara whispered the mandatory, weary announcement. Clara housekeeping. Silence. She took a step in, reaching for the light switch, convinced the room was vacant. That's when a deep, resonant voice cut through the stillness, cool and precise, coming from the shadows of the balcony doorway. Marcus Thorne, you're exceptionally late. Clara froze, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Her tired posture instantly snapped to attention. Clara, I apologize, sir. I was given the instruction for 8. I must have come to the wrong room. Emerging into the faint reflective city light was Marcus Thorne. The billionaire CEO wasn't wearing the sharp armor of his corporate empire. His silk shirt was open at the collar, his dark hair slightly disheveled. He looked less like the titan of finance the tabloids worshipped, and more like a man utterly worn out by the pretense of his own life. His gaze, usually sharp and calculating, now held a weary curiosity as it settled on the flustered maid. Marcus Thorne, I asked for a night of absolute solitude. Instead, I get an unexpected guest. You are the new night staff. Clara, yes sir. I'll leave immediately. The sudden, absolute darkness felt like a dramatic, theatrical intervention. Clara gasped, a small, involuntary sound of fear and frustration. Marcus, however, chuckled, a low, genuine sound that was strangely disarming. Marcus Thorne, it seems fate has decided against your immediate departure. Miss Clara Mendez, Marcus Torna Mendez. Unless you care to navigate that corridor in absolute darkness, you'll wait. He moved to the small cabinet, effortlessly lighting a small, battery-operated lamp, casting a warm, isolating glow that emphasized the sudden intimacy of the space. In the gentle amber light, his guard seemed to drop completely. For the first time in weeks, Marcus found himself facing someone who wanted absolutely nothing from him. Someone whose visible exhaustion was entirely genuine. He saw a rare honesty. They talked in fragmented sentences, the roar of the storm providing cover. He spoke vaguely of the constant pressure, the endless charade of wealth that had hollowed him out. Clara, in turn, spoke simply of her sister, of her mother's illness, and the singular, driving need to work without fail. Clara, my mother always said, sir, that if you can't afford to give money, you give kindness. It's the only currency that never runs out. Her words, simple and profound, struck him with the force of the storm outside, a truth he hadn't heard in a boardroom in decades. When the lights finally flickered back to life, the magical connection dissolved. Clara, embarrassed by the intimacy, quickly gathered her cart and fled. The following morning, as the hotel buzzed back to life, Marcus found a small, worn notebook tucked beside his alarm clock. Clara's kindness journal. He opened it, intending to find a number, but instead found pages filled with small, handwritten observations. A co-worker sharing a sandwich, a guest giving a sincere thank you, a bus driver waiting an extra moment for a running elderly woman. It was a ledger of human grace. Marcus Thorne felt the weight of his own existence suddenly shift. By noon, the hotel manager received a concise, unshakable request. Marcus Thorne, I want Miss Mendez assigned to the top-floor executive wing immediately. She has a focus and an honesty that far surpasses my current staff. Make it happen. Clara, stunned by the unexpected promotion, collected her recovered notebook from the concierge desk. She flipped open the front cover. Beneath the worn, faded lines of her own teenage handwriting, a new message, in bold, assured script, had been added. Narrator, kindness deserves to be remembered. Always. The transition to the executive wing was absolute. One day, Clara Mendez was pushing a heavy cart through the service tunnels, navigating the unseen arteries of the hotel. The next, she was walking across plush Persian rugs where her footsteps made no sound. The air here was rarefied, silent, and intimidating. She moved with a careful precision, ghosting through the suites, arranging fresh lilies and smoothing Egyptian cotton sheets, always expecting someone to tell her there had been a mistake. She kept the small notebook in her apron pocket, the ink of Marcus Thorne's message pressing against her side like a secret brand. But the distance she expected from the CEO did not materialize. Late one Tuesday, as the city sky bruised into a deep purple twilight, the phone in the service pantry rang. It was Mr. Thorne's personal assistant, but the request came directly from the man himself. He didn't need the room turned down. He needed help. When Clara arrived at the private function room, the Azure Lounge, she found Marcus amidst a chaotic sea of seating charts, guest lists, and half-open boxes of gala favors. He looked less like a master of the universe and more like a man drowning in logistics. He looked up as she entered, relief washing over his features. Marcus Thorne, the event coordinator, called in sick. I have 50 high-net-worth donors arriving in 48 hours for a private dinner, and apparently I can run a multinational conglomerate, but I cannot figure out the seating arrangement for a charity auction without causing a diplomatic incident. Clara hesitated only for a moment before rolling up the sleeves of her uniform. For the next 2 days, the lines between master and servant blurred into something resembling a partnership. They worked late into the night, the only sounds the rustle of paper and the hum of the HVAC system. It was during these quiet, unguarded hours that the walls truly came down. They were sorting through donation packets when the conversation drifted from logistics to motivations. Marcus confessed that the Charity Foundation for Medical Relief often felt like another tax write-off for his peers, a hollow pageant of check writing. He sounded cynical, a man who had forgotten the taste of genuine altruism. Clara, it isn't hollow to the people who get the medicine, sir. When my mother got approved for her treatment last year, we didn't care who signed the check or if they did it for a tax break. We just cried. We sat at the kitchen table and cried because it meant she got to see another Christmas. Marcus stopped working. He looked at Clara, really looked at her, seeing beyond the uniform to the woman who carried the weight of a family on her shoulders with such quiet dignity. Marcus Thorne, I started this foundation 10 years ago because I wanted to change things. Somewhere along the way, between the board meetings and the black-tie dinners, I think I became part of the machinery I was trying to fix. You remind me of the why, Clara. You make it real again. The night of the gala arrived in a wash of gold light and crystal. The Azure Lounge was transformed. String quartets played softly in the corner, and the room filled with the murmur of the city's elite. Clara was there, not as a guest, but hovering on the periphery, ensuring the flow of the evening remained unbroken. She felt invisible, a shadow in a room of stars, until she caught Marcus's eye across the crowded room. He wasn't looking at the investors. He was watching her manage a difficult donor with a grace that no amount of money could buy. As the event wound down and the last of the limousines pulled away from the curb, the room fell into a heavy, exhausted silence. The staff began to clear the tables, but Marcus signaled for Clara to join him on the balcony. The city was a grid of light below them, the storm from their first meeting long gone, replaced by a clear, cold clarity. Marcus Thorne, I watched you tonight. You handled Mrs. Vanderwall better than my vice president does, and she's terrified of everyone. Clara, I just listened to her, sir. Most people just want to feel like they're being heard. Marcus turned to her, resting his hands on the stone railing. The distance between them felt negligible now. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a brochure for a new initiative the board had been debating at. Leadership training program, designed to fast-track young talent into management. Roles within the hospitality sector. Marcus Thorne, we're launching a new tier of the foundation. It's a management training program. Intense, rigorous. It's meant for people who want to run hotels, not just work in them. I want you to be the first candidate. Clara stared at him, the wind catching the loose strands of her hair. Clara and Mr. Thorne, I didn't finish college. I don't have a business degree. I'm a maid. Marcus shook his head, a small, knowing smile playing on his lips. Marcus Thorne, I can hire 1,000 MBAs. Clara, I can find people who can recite economic theory in their sleep. But you have something they can't learn in a lecture hall. You understand people. You understand the dignity of service. You have empathy. That is the rarest qualification in this building. Don't tell me about degrees. Tell me you'll take the spot. For the first time, Clara didn't look down. She looked him in the eye, seeing the belief he held for her. A belief that was slowly, terrifyingly, starting to take root in her own heart. The 30 days of Marcus Thorne's suspension passed not with a bang, but with a suffocating, echoing silence within the corridors of the Grand Summit Hotel. For Clara Mendez, the executive wing felt like a museum exhibit, perfectly preserved, coldly beautiful, and entirely lifeless without the man who had breathed purpose into it. She kept her head down, studying her management modules, dodging the icy glares of the board members, and holding on to the memory of his parting words like a lifeline. She was surviving, but she wasn't living. The gossip started in the break rooms and drifted upward, transforming from idle chatter into weaponized concern. Terms like lack of qualifications and compromised judgment began appearing in internal memos. The board of directors, a collection of stony-faced investors who cared only for margins and stock prices, watched the developing dynamic between the billionaire and the former Maid with narrowing eyes. They didn't see mentorship. They saw liability. They saw a weakness in Marcus Thorne's armor. The summons came on a grey slate-colored Tuesday. It wasn't a request. It was a demand. The board was convening an emergency review of executive conduct. Clara stood outside the heavy mahogany double doors of the boardroom, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched a file of her recent training assessments. She felt like an imposter again, the maid who had walked into the wrong room. Only this time, the lightning striking wasn't outside the window. It was aimed directly at Marcus. Inside, the air was cold and recycled. Marcus sat at the head of the long, polished table, alone. Facing him were 12 people who held the keys to his empire. The chairman, a man named Sterling, whose smile never reached his eyes, slid a folder across the reflective surface. It contained photos of Marcus and Clara working late, logs of her promotion, and a dossier of anonymous complaints regarding improper favoritism. Marcus Thorne, I assume there is a point to this theater. Sterling, or did you just miss my company? Chairman Sterling, the point, Marcus, is appearances. We are a publicly traded entity. We cannot have the CEO bypassing standard HR protocols to fast-track ... personal interests. It looks unstable. It looks like you've lost your objectivity. Marcus Thorne, objectivity. You call it objectivity to ignore potential because it wears a housekeeper's uniform. I found someone with more integrity in one finger than this entire board has in its collective body. Chairman Sterling, integrity doesn't drive share prices. Stability does. You've blurred the lines. Marcus, we are formally accusing you of professional misconduct. We want an apology, a public retraction of her placement, and a return to standard protocol. The room held its breath. This was the offrum. Marcus could save himself with a few words. He could throw Clara to the wolves, demote her back to the linen closets, and retain his crown. He looked at the faces around the table, men and women who viewed people as numbers. Then he thought of the kindness journal, the quiet strength Clara showed when the world was dark. Marcus Thorne. No. Chairman Sterling. Excuse me. Marcus Thorne. I said no. I will not apologize for identifying talent. I will not apologize for believing in someone who actually gives a damn about the human beings inside this building. If that is misconduct, then I have been conducting myself wrongly for years by listening to you. The silence that followed was heavy, final. The gavel didn't need to bang. The decision was made in the cold stares of the board. Chairman Sterling, then you leave us no choice. Pending a full external investigation, your executive authority is suspended, effective immediately. 30 days. Marcus, step away, or we vote for permanent removal. The walk from the boardroom to his office felt like a funeral procession. Though Marcus walked with his head high, he began packing a single box not with awards or plaques, but with personal essentials. Clara was waiting by his door when he emerged. She had heard the news. Bad news travels instantly in a hotel. Her face was pale, guilt written into every line of her expression. Clara, they did this because of me. I ruined it. I should just quit. Marcus, if I leave, maybe they'll let you back in. Marcus Thorne, stop, don't you dare. He set the box down on his assistant's desk and turned to her, his intensity burning through the defeat of the moment. Marcus Thorne, they didn't do this because of you, Clara. They did this because I finally stood for something they couldn't control. You didn't ruin anything. You woke me up, Clara, but you're leaving. You're the only reason I'm here. Marcus Thorne, I was the one who opened the door. Yes, but you are the one who walked through it. You earned every inch of ground you stand on. Do not let them intimidate you. Do not let them make you feel small. You belong here, Clara, more than they do. He reached out, almost touching her shoulder, then pulled back, respecting the boundaries the board had just weaponized against him. Marcus Thorne, I have to go, but this isn't over. Keep working, keep learning, prove them wrong. Not for me, for yourself. He picked up his box and walked toward the elevator. Clara watched him go, the golden doors sliding shut, cutting off the only ally she had in a world of sharks. She stood alone in the hallway, the silence ringing in her ears, realizing that for the first time, she was truly on her own. But as she touched the notebook in her pocket, she realized she wasn't empty. He had left, but he had left her with dignity, and that was a weapon she now knew how to use. The calendar turned, marking 30 days since the boardroom doors had closed on Marcus Thorne. For Clara, the Grand Summit had become a fortress of solitude, perfectly preserved, coldly beautiful, and entirely lifeless, without the man who had breathed purpose into it. She kept her head down, studying her management modules, dodging the icy glares of the board members, and holding on to the memory of his parting words like a lifeline. She was surviving, but she wasn't living. Then, exactly 1 month after his departure, a courier arrived at the staff entrance. He didn't carry a termination notice or a legal summons, but a simple, heavy envelope of cream-colored cardstock. It bore a new logo, a simple open door, and an address in the industrial district on the city's east side, a neighborhood far removed from the 5-star luxury Clara navigated daily. The text was brief: the Thorne Community Hub, grand opening. Your presence is the only requirement. Clara took the train east, watching the skyline shift from glass towers to brick warehouses. When she arrived at the address, she stopped dead on the sidewalk. It wasn't a stiff, formal venue. It was an old textile factory that had been scrubbed clean and reborn. Sunlight poured through massive skylights, illuminating a space that hummed with life. There were classrooms, a free medical clinic, a legal aid desk, and a cafeteria that smelled of fresh bread, not expensive truffles. Standing in the center of the atrium was Marcus. He wasn't wearing the severe black suits that had been his armor at the hotel. He wore a simple button-down sleeves rolled to the elbows, laughing as he helped a volunteer hang a banner. When he turned and saw her, the noise of the crowd seemed to drop away. He crossed the concrete floor in long strides, the fatigue that had shadowed his eyes for months entirely gone. Marcus Thorne, you came. I wasn't sure if you would. Clara, you invited me. I would have walked here if the trains weren't running. Marcus, ... What is this place? Marcus Thorne. This is what I should have been building for the last decade, instead of accumulating trophies. It's a resource center, job training, healthcare, housing assistance, no red tape, no board of directors looking for a return on investment. He gestured to the bustling room, where families were already signing up for programs. Marcus Thorne, do you remember what you told me that first night? About your mother. You said people don't need charity that makes them feel small. You said they need opportunity that reminds them they matter. That sentence has been ringing in my head for 30 days. This place exists to tell them they matter. Clara felt a lump form in her throat. She looked at the families, then back at the billionaire who had traded his empire for something real. Clara, you did this in a month. Marcus Thorne, I had a lot of free time, and I finally had the right motivation. Later, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long golden beams across the factory floor, Marcus took a small stage to address the volunteers and community leaders. He spoke with a charisma that was different, now less calculated, more raw. He spoke of the responsibility of privilege and how easy it was to lose sight of humanity from the top of a skyscraper. Marcus Thorne, I spent years thinking leadership was about control, about maintaining order, but I learned recently, from a teacher I didn't expect, that true leadership is about heart. It's about noticing the people standing in the shadows and realizing they are the ones holding up the sky. His eyes found Clara's in the crowd, unwavering and full of an emotion he no longer tried to hide. Marcus Thorne. This center is built on the philosophy that kindness deserves to be remembered, and I learned that from the bravest person I know. When the applause faded and the crowd began to thin, Marcus found Clara standing by the large bay windows, looking out at the grit and beauty of the neighborhood. He stood beside her, the silence between them comfortable, charged with a new kind of electricity. Clara, they're going to want you back, you know. The 30 days are up. The board is already panicking without you. Marcus Thorne, let them panic. I'm not going back to being who I was, and I don't want to go back to being alone. He turned her to face him, his expression serious, stripping away the last remnants of their employer-employee dynamic. Marcus Thorne, my life was a perfectly scheduled, empty room until the night the lights went out. You walked through the wrong door, Clara. You stumbled into the dark and you lit a lamp. I don't want you to leave that room. I want to build a life where we don't have to hide who we are. Clara searched his face, looking for any sign of hesitation, but found only certainty. Clara, you're asking a maid to share a life with the CEO. The world will say it's a mistake. Marcus smiled, and it was the same genuine, disarming laugh she had heard in the thunderstorm. He took her hand, interlacing their fingers. Marcus Thorne, then let them talk, because you walking through that wrong door was the best mistake we ever made. Outside, the streetlights flickered on, illuminating the path forward. It wasn't the path either of them had expected, but as they stood together in the house built by kindness, they knew it was the only one worth taking.